I saw the video of Harry Callis calling the final out of the World Series, and in the background you see our next guest, Chris Wheeler, really just losing it. I mean, just can't believe that after all these years of being with this organization, the Philadelphia Phillies are World Series champions.
Yeah, and excited in a classy way, too, because I know he didn't want to step on Harry's call. So, I mean, that's the most exuberant, silent celebration you'll ever see.
And I woke up this morning and I saw that video, and then I immediately texted you and I said, you know what? I'd really like to talk to Wheels today.
I always like to talk to
with that backdrop of Utley deciding that this will be his last year. The video the other night from Comcast or NBC Philadelphia. We talked the other day that the World Series team is now 10 years ago. And at the All-Star break, what better time to reflect back with Chris Wheeler, of course, a former member of the Phillies broadcast team of the 2008 World Series champions, and he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline here on the Sports Bash. Wheels, you're with Mike and Pete. How are you?
Okay, guys, I'm glad to be with you.
It's good to have you. As I said, I woke up this morning and saw that video, and immediately, we're at the All-Star break. You look back and reflect a little bit. And I guess hearing that Utley's going to decide to retire at the end of the year, we're losing more guys from that team. And I guess of all the guys, he might have been maybe the most interesting because he was so quiet, yet was so productive over that time. He's like the guy that we really maybe don't know all that much about. What could you share with us from your time of, dealing with Chase Utley?
Well, what you see is what you get with him, or what you saw was what you got. He just showed up every day, kind of an old-style baseball player, perfect for the city of Philadelphia, ran the ball out, got his uniform dirty. I think any interview you'll ever hear with Chase Utley from back in those days, he never would talk about himself. He was a tough interview for guys because you didn't get a whole lot out of him. All he ever did want to do was talk about the team, no matter what happened with him. So he was the kind of guy. He's very private. He's the kind of guy to be walking through the hotel lobby with a cell phone in his ear, and you knew he wasn't talking to anybody. So we used to laugh. We used to see him. We'd go walking by, and we'd go, "Hey, I'm talking to nobody again, huh?" And he'd give you I won't say what he'd say, but he'd give you a little shot when he went by. That's what he was. He was all business. He came to play. If he hadn't missed that time with those knees and those injuries that he had, to me, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He would have had more home runs than any second baseman in history, and the point would have been moot about what would happen to him in 5 years. But unfortunately, he went down for a couple of years, and we didn't even know if he'd play again when he had those bad knees. But typical of him, he came back and still was a very, very good, productive player.
Yeah, Wheels, you don't have to tell us what he actually said because we heard it at the parade championship inside Citizens Bank. I mean, that was the true Chase Utley, maybe for the first time to the fan base, revealing what he said. And you were on that stage. I mean, were you shocked when he said that, or were you like, yep, that's Chase?
Well, all I can tell you is pictures don't lie. And if you ever see the overview of that shot that was in the papers and that they used, I'm in the back row with the broadcasters, and I have my head in my hands. Because my first thought was, as a guy who had worked in the organization for so long and been on the publicity PR side of it before I became a broadcaster, I just thought to myself, oh, I'm glad I'm not involved in this anymore, and somebody's going to have to put out some fires. But you know what? He thought he was just talking to 40,000 of his closest friends. It wasn't like he thought it was going all over the country. Those guys have been on those. I've been on those same floats a long time, and they got a little overserved a little bit, some of them. I don't know whether that happened or not. I'm not saying that. But anyway, they were really in a very festive mood at that point. They were feeling the love from that amazing crowd that was in the ballpark that afternoon. And that's what he's really like. That didn't say a whole lot, as I said, that the public consumed, but we heard him enough times. And, he's very earthy. He had his way of getting his point across, and if you liked something, you knew it. If you didn't like something, you knew it.
Yeah, I mean, he's 39 years old. He's going to retire at the end of the year. Are you surprised that he's still doing it? Like, when you looked at that group of guys, did you think he would be the last of that group to continue playing?
Well, no, because, we figured, you looked at it and you thought it'd probably be Hamels because he was the youngest. But As far as the guys who had a little bit of age on them and had been in the league for a while when all that happened, no, because of his injuries. I really thought that they would catch up to him again at some point, and who knows that they haven't. He works so hard, and he goes out there and he played so much pain over the years. I can't tell you that he hasn't over the last few years. You could see his skills were starting to wane a little bit. He's a little bit late on pitches that he used to hit before. But I'm sure that the Dodgers, and I won't put words in their mouth, but I'm sure the Dodgers looked at him the way we looked at John Vukovich a long time ago in the early 80s and all, as a 25th guy in your club, on your roster, that was a man in that clubhouse, that knew how to handle situations, that knew how to talk to his teammates, knew how to get in somebody's face if they had to, pat them on the back if they had to, and what they contributed, they contributed. And he contributed to the Dodgers. I mean, he played a lot at the beginning of the year because Forsythe was hurt, Seager went down, and they had a lot of injury problems. So I think he played a little bit, and he started out pretty well, and I probably started to catch up with him a little bit. But to me, he would never be a mercy booking, and there was a reason they brought him back on those one-year deals.
Yeah, no doubt. He even kind of alluded to it, that, all the roles that he's played with the Dodgers. And I guess it's testament to his character, Wheels, that all the players jammed into that room, too. He didn't realize that, they were all going to be – that's a tiny room out at Chavez Ravine for their press conference availability. And that's respect. And what better respect than them all to be standing there while he talks?
Well, I'm not surprised. It was in the game 47 years, and he would always be in my top 10 of people that I respect, and I was lucky enough to be around. That generation of players have been their father. So, you didn't get real close to them like my favorite team's the 80 team, because we were all around the same age and went through all the trials and tribulations of the 70s together, and then we're lucky enough to win a World Series in 80 and be a part of all that. So Chase and I, I'm not saying we're friends or close or anything like that, but he was always very civil. If you needed something from him or ask him a question, as long as you didn't ask him something stupid, and I usually had the ability not to do that, or he wasn't mad at you if something he may have said, he would keep that inside. I just look at him as a guy that we'll all look back on when he finally plays his last game and leaves the game as somebody who left the game a better place. And I don't know how many guys you can say that about anymore, but he will always be a positive on the game of baseball, in my opinion.
Baseball's great, Wheels, because Chris Wheeler with us on the Boardwalk Honda hotline, by the way, because that first home run, and this came out when Chase made his announcement the other day, his very first major league hit, grand slam down the right field line. And that's Gabe Kapler looking, almost running into the wall at the vet. I mean, it's just so cyclical. But yeah, I guess I wanted to ask you, because that list started to come out of the fake throw, doesn't throw to first, throws to home and nails the guy in the World Series, or Chase, you are the man, when he takes the extra bag. Where in the pantheon of Chase Utley highlights, which one stands out to you? Or is it one that we haven't seen, like something that happened off the field?
Oh, wow. That's it. I'm going to have to sit and think about that in case it ever comes up again, because I saw him do so many remarkable things. Seeing him hit those couple home runs in the World Series at Yankee Stadium, I remember thinking, boy, this is special. This is really special. He not even just hit 2 home runs in a World Series game. He just hit it at Yankee Stadium. Yes. It's just different. He hit the home run against the Rays that night in the first game of the series in St. Petersburg, and got to help get the Phillies on their way to winning the first game of the World Series on the road. That would be his world championship that we're talking about right now. I loved it when he showed that emotion when he knocked in that run against the Mets in early August, when the Phillies had that big comeback off Billy Wagner in the 9th inning.
Right.
Who knew at the time what that was going to do? But it really helped. The Mets went into a funk after that. They had 2 years in a row that happened to them. And I remember when he knocked in the run, I think it was Sowaguchi scored it, who was second baseman. Who was playing for us at the time. And he stood at first base, and he actually showed emotion at first base after that winning run scored before his teammates mobbed him. He didn't do that. I heard, I haven't seen that whole thing, but I've seen some clips on it. I heard him talking about in the pile, You know,
Yes.
those kind of things are not Chase Utley. You know, he doesn't like to do those kind of things. He doesn't like to show people what really burns inside a lot of times. And that game, now that we're talking about special moments, I remember watching him and thinking, wow, everybody just saw a little bit about what's really boiling inside there every day, and he let the public see it. He had one face to the public. You know, behind it, like I said, I'm not his friend, or I wouldn't have drinking with him at night or having dinner with him or hearing his innermost thoughts, or like I knew a lot of the other guys from the early days. But when you were around him, you would see him be funny. He was very, very funny. He had a way of it. He was a needler is what he was. He was one of those subtle guys that could really needle people and get under their skin and do those kind of things. And that was a part of him that the public never really saw.
Yeah, it's funny because, a lot of people used to say that Andy Reid was like a totally different guy behind closed doors than the guy you saw doing the press conferences all the time. And I always felt like that was probably Chase Utley. Like he probably was a little bit more lively around the guys than he was in front of the media.
Very guarded, very stereotyped. Just saying what, as I said, he always would talk. Just listen to his old interviews; they're always about somebody else. He never used the word me and I and those kind of things. So those were anathema to him. He just didn't roll that way. That was not his way of doing things. So he knew, as a star on that team and a leader on that team and the guy in the clubhouse that so many people looked up to, that there were times that he was going to have to be the guy in front of the media. He understood that. He got it. He didn't want to do it. He didn't like doing it. And he wanted to get it over with as fast as he could and not say anything that anybody could throw back in his face or use on a talk show or something like that, or say that Utley said this last night. Probably one of the least quotable superstars I've ever been around is Chase Utley.
Yeah, Wheels, in the 2009 season, I can remember being in the clubhouse during the Phillies going through a stretch. So they're the defending champions, and Ryan Howard was having his struggles. I think he'd gone 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts, booed a lot because he'd been struggling for at least 2 or 3 weeks in a row at that point in time. And we're all sitting there. You know how it is in the clubhouse. The media come in, and they're kind of waiting by the chair. And all of a sudden, I look to my left, and Chase Utley's making eye contact with me and says, come on, guys, you want to talk? And if Chase Utley wants to talk, then you turn your camera and go over on him. So I go over. I'm in the A position. I'm talking to him one-on-one. The other people come over, basically the whole group. Out of the corner of my right eye, I see Ryan Howard come out. He's able to get dressed quietly. I think Blackjack got one question to him, and then he gets out of the clubhouse. And so when the scrum got done with Chase Utley, I looked right at him. He was basically like, okay, is that it? And he goes, is that it? And I said, I know what you did. And he says, what are you talking about? And I said, I know what you did.
What are you talking about?
He winked at me. Wheels, he winked at me, which is like,
great story.
Damn right I did. I'm covering for my teammate so he doesn't have to answer your stupid questions.
That's great, Pete. That's a great story. That really is. And he and you're around him, and you can tell people. He would have a twinkle in his eye once in a while when he knew he was getting the better of somebody, either a teammate or the media or a front office person or a broadcaster or somebody. He would get that little twinkle in his eye, and he didn't smile, big smile all the time, but he had a little smirk that he would get.
Oh yeah,
and. That's a great story. Yeah, sure. And that's my point about the way he would stand up when he had. Here's another thing. We say in our game, and so many people don't have it, but you need a feel when you're in sports. I don't know about other sports, but I know about our game, and you better have a feel for things, or if you don't, you're going to be stepping in it all the time. The guy had an innate feel of how to be a pro. I don't know who would give credit for having gotten him to that point. But there was somebody along the way, or one or two guys, that definitely had to have an influence on him to teach him how to be a pro and play the game the right way.
Chris Wheeler is with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. We are taking a look back at Utley's career and the 2008 Phillies. They had a nice piece on NBC Philadelphia. It's been 10 years since that team. And Wheels, 07, they kind of came out of, I don't want to say out of nowhere. They were coming on in 06, but they make the playoffs, but they kind of get knocked out pretty quickly. At what point of the 08 season were you feeling like this team might be something here? Was there a time that you vividly remember, or was just going into that season that now is finally our time?
Well, I don't know that I ever felt that until they really got to the World Series, because until you win, I'd been through it before. Back in the 70s when the Phillies lost 3 straight years, and back then, you only had to win 3 games and you went to the World Series. Everybody remembers it was, best out of 5, boom, that was playoffs, and you went to the World Series, and then everything expanded after that, and it became so much more difficult. So the year before, it got knocked off right away by the Rockies. And the Rockies had come into that series on a high that was unbelievable, what they had accomplished at the end, getting in a 1-game playoff with San Diego, winning that, coming in on a high, and they knocked us off. So to me, I thought that we had really, really good players. I always worried and thought, I don't know about our rotation, but, we had Lidge, who was a pretty good at the beginning. Then you realize how good he was going to be as the season went along. But to me, I really didn't get a feel that was a team that might go deep into the playoffs or maybe even get to the big dance until they got through that first series. And I think it was Milwaukee, if I'm not wrong. I think the first series was Milwaukee, then the Dodgers. And once they got through Milwaukee, then I thought, you know what? They know how to win a series right now. This group had never won a playoff series before. And whether you believe it or not, you need to do those kind of things before you really think you can win. And once they won that first series, I thought, you know what? They may have something going here. There may be a little lightning. They may be catching a little lightning in a bottle this year, and maybe this thing can go further than anybody thought it would go, and obviously it did. So to me, as a baseball guy that I was and still am, you had to show me certain things, and to me it's a process. It's not something where you go, oh, yeah, they're going to go all the way. They've just won 4 in a row, or they just beat this team in a series. No. You have to prove it, and nowadays you really have to prove it because you have to go through so many games to get to the World Series and then be a champion.
Chris Wheeler with us now. That's the 25 guys on the field. I saw a Facebook Live thing last night with Amy Fadul and Charlie Manuel. And, boy, Wheels, you got to give old Charlie credit, too. I mean, this is a guy, the town wanted Jim Leland. They booed him, basically, when he came in. They thought he talked funny. He almost gets in a fight with a local media member. And actually, I think some people like that. But anyhow, he basically was ostracized when he joined the club. And yet here he said to Amy last night, in the group last night at Citizens Bank Park, if you remember my very first press conference, I said, if you guys give me a chance, you'll come to love me. And boy, don't they.
Well, there's another example of a guy that people didn't know. We just spent a lot of time talking about that, and what he was like. And, well, people, we were lucky enough to know Charlie. And, I did a pregame radio show with him for 9 years or 7 years or 8 years, whatever it was. And, he used to call me his shrink. Wheels, I really need to vent some nights, and you let me do it. Everything. I would sit there and just listen. But you know what? You had to feel that he knew what he was doing, and if people would just leave him alone. There was Uncle Charlie, and he was everybody's buddy. Well, they didn't understand. I can't tell you how many times that I had to leave his office at nights because he had to talk to somebody. And the only people that knew that he did that were the guy that he just talked to, maybe me, and the coaches or anybody that seen him, the player, walk in there. But nobody knew what happened. And he would take care of things that way. And he could be their best buddy. He could go out and slap them on the back and have a good time. And then he also could jump their butts. And one thing about Charlie, which all good managers have to do, you have to be able to jump the stars. Doesn't do you any good to jump the extra men. But you better get on the big boys if they do something. And you better let the other guys know that you just got on one of the big boys. And he was able to do that. He had a great personality, which came out after a while, and I know what you're saying. We went through all that stuff with a couple of jackasses in town that were making fun of him, and that he wanted to, he wanted to physically confront. And there's a part of you that wished he would snap him over his knee, and then you realize, well, we can't have that because you can't resort to those kind of things when you're in a position of leadership the way that he was. But those of us who were around him and got to know him now, as I said, I didn't know Chase Utley but I know Charlie Manuel very, very, very well from all the time we spent together. And there was no doubt in my mind that he had a chance if we got the right mix in that clubhouse that some good things could happen, because I knew the way that they reacted to him and the way that they enjoyed being around him and play for him and the way that he liked a lot of them and wanted to see them get better. And it all worked out.
Yeah, and before I forget, just that instinct, too, of situations, too. I mean, like, hey, they're going to bring in Broxton, so we like Stairs here.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of guys, you didn't have the analytics that you have now where you have it down to every. But you had guys that did well off certain guys, and you knew that Broxton was going to, what he was going to do. He was going to come in mostly pump fastballs, hard breaking balls, and then he had a tendency to get balls middle in and down to left-handed hitter. That's why Jimmy Rollins hit him so well, and that's a hot zone for left. There are very few left-handed hitters that don't have a hot zone down and in. That's where they want it, and that's where a guy like Matt Stairs hated the ball away from him, because he was always going to open up and try to jerk it and see how far he could hit it. That's what he did in BP. That's what he would do during a pinch hitting appearance or when he would play. And Broxton was one of those guys that you knew what he was going to do. He was going to come after you. And if he made a mistake down the middle or down and in to a guy like Stairs, good things could happen. And that's exactly what happened in that situation.
I had said the other day, Wheels, and you were around a lot of the very best Phillies teams from all the different eras, whether it was in the late 70s, the 80 team, the 83 team that made the World Series, the 93 team, and then, of course, the 08 team. I had said I thought that Brad Lidge may have had the most important, impactful season in the history of the franchise. For him to come over and be perfect, they didn't win. They didn't run away with that division. If he slips up one or two times, you might be talking about a different story that we're having this conversation here. How do you feel the same way that Lidge season maybe is kind of under the radar because there were so many great, long-time Phillies on that team?
Yeah, I think sometimes you take for granted what we called him Lidge, what Brad Lidge did that year. He was unbelievable. And I'll tell you another unsung hero when you bring back Lidge all the time is a guy that was behind the plate, because Carlos Ruiz, they had great confidence in Carlos Ruiz, the coaching staff, the manager and coaching staff, pitching coach especially, Rich Stubbe, and Lidge more than anything, because where was Lidge's out pitch? It was in the dirt. You weren't going to throw that split. That split was not going to be a called strike. Just 99.9% of the time, that was a pitch that you threw out of the strike zone to have a guy chase. And what good does it do you if the catcher can't block it and keep it in front of him, and you get wild pitches and guys are moving up, taking the double play away, we are getting a strikeout and a wild pitch, and all of a sudden there's a guy on first base that shouldn't be on there, and maybe some of the momentum goes away, or you wild pitch a guy in from third, more importantly, in a one-run game. Never happened. Well, I'm not saying it never happened, but rarely happened with Chooch back there. And Lidge had the great confidence that Chooch was going to call that pitch, his best pitch, and that he was going to block that baby, and that he could throw it in the dirt and not worry about it. And I think that you want to bring up Lidge. Well, I think one of the most unsung parts of that team in 2008 was Carlos Ruiz's ability to block the ball in the dirt off Brad Lidge. Now, maybe that's a little bit too much inside baseball, and people say, "Oh, okay," but I really think that was a big part of the whole thing.
There's so many interesting stories because, as you would probably attest, this wasn't the most talented of the Phillies teams. I mean, there was no Lee. There was no Halladay. The pitching staff here was kind of nondescript. You had a young Hamels. You had a aging Jamie Moyer who won, 16 games that year. So it is kind of interesting that of all the teams, this is the one that ended up winning it. Who was kind of, do you believe, the unsung? You mentioned Ruiz, but I'm talking about pitching-wise because they didn't have the Lee or Halladay on this team. They didn't have that guy that every fifth day you knew was going to hammer it down. It seemed like, such a interesting group to win a World Series with that pitching staff.
Well, one of the guys that did a remarkable job with when you look at the stuff that he had was Jamie Moyer. This is a guy that Pat Gillick knew from Seattle when he was really good. And, Jamie was at the point where he's throwing fastballs at 83, 84 mile an hour and winning and competing with it. So, I look back on that and having Jamie Moyer on that team in the starting rotation on that team, and Myers too, who, Brett did a pretty good job that year. You're right. I mean, there was no dominant starter on that team. There was nobody that you looked at. Hamels was obviously Hamels, but we're going past that. You just don't win with one starter. And Cole was, a guy just kind of coming into his own at that point to be the great star that he was going to be. He was good. He was really good. But after that, it was kind of a crapshoot. And I can't begin to tell you the nights I sat in there with Charlie. He'd be shaking his head about who he was going to run out that night as a starter and who the other guy had out there. So, yeah, that team won because they were a very good defensive team. Victorino and Worth really helped make that a very good defensive team, as did Jimmy Rollins. Jimmy Rollins was so unheralded and so unappreciated defensively, and so was the guy behind the plate I mentioned, in Carlos Ruiz. And Chase Utley did his job at second. So up the middle, they were really strong. Defensively, they were a really good team, and they had three superstars on the way in first base, second base, and third base that were really coming into their own, and a superstar pitcher coming into his own in Hamels. But I totally agree with that. When you look back on it, that is not a rotation that you would look at that was going to do well. Now, the bullpen was really good that year. They brought, I think Romero came over and some other guys that helped set up Lidge, and Lidge did the things that he did. So, sometimes you'll hear that you can win if your starting pitching is a little inexperienced and your bullpen is a veteran bullpen. And I think if we were to go back and analyze that team, that pretty much summed up the way that Phillies team was with their rotation, with the exception of Moyer.
There's a couple of things that people remember. Obviously, Lidge striking out, Hinsky to win it, Stairs bomb into the night. But how about the at-bat from Myers against Sabathia?
It was great. And, one of the things that was so great about that was the way the fans reacted. They're not going to do that in it. Our fans have a clue. I mean, they understand the game. They knew what was going on down there. And they knew that CC Sabathia was coming into that game on 3 days rest. And there was some thought about Milwaukee not even throwing him that night because, he had a big workload in near the end of the season for them to get there. So the guy was on fumes a little bit. And now here you have your 9-hole hitter, the pitcher up there giving him an otherworldly at-bat, and gets on base and walks to load the bases. And now Sabathia is out there trying to get his act together, and the next thing you know, Victorino early in the count pops a grand slam home run, and the place goes crazy. So, yes, that was one of – you look back in baseball and say, well, pitcher, you should have the DH. Well, in this case, we're talking about a pitcher batting in the game that had a tremendous part, played a tremendous part in that game. But I really believe the crowd had a lot to do with that night because Brett Myers – now you talk about a competitor – Brett Myers had his faults, but one of them was that he didn't care and didn't compete, and he was competing in that at-bat. He was trying to do something and get on base, and I don't remember, but I think it was 9, 10 pitches. Someone will have to look that up sometime and tell me what that was, but it was a lot of pitches that he threw, and Brett kept fouling them off. And I think Sabathia kind of lost concentration a little bit after that, and Victorino got him. And that game, for all intents and purposes, and maybe even that series, was over after that because that really hurt Milwaukee.
What a run. 10 years ago, the 2008 Phillies win the World Series, and Chase Utley last week is saying that this will be his final year, so it looks like Cole Hamels will be the lone guy standing. Jason Worth announced earlier this month that he, too, is retiring from baseball, so that 2008 team, we are seeing the end of an era. Chris Wheeler was kind enough to share some stories with us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Wheels, we always appreciate your time. We thank you so much.
Well, Pete, Mike, I always enjoy talking to you guys. You enjoy the game, the game, and I like talking to guys that know what they're talking about. So anytime.